thanks for your patience with the audio visuals. I promise I was not the one who broke the equipment. But now it's all up to me, right? So this is uphill. So we are here to talk about the topic of dirty money. I just love that. Actually, I didn't come up with that name. That's all yours. So, but it really works for this topic. We're going to talk about ethics and nonprofit. And I was told this is a highly interactive group. That would be ideal. I would love your participation. It's perfectly fine to interrupt, shout out, and do all that sort of stuff. Okay? I mean it. So start. No. All right. So I did promise I'd tell you a little bit about myself, so I just want to give you a quick overview. I am a CFRE, if you know what that is, Certified Fundraising Executive. I'm serving as the CEO of Educare Arizona. I've been in nonprofit in several states and have worked for over 30 years in the field. I was named Outstanding Fundraising Executive. That was way back. Now it sounds like a long time ago. At least it begins with a 2. That's good, right? I've been on the International Catholic Stewardship Council. I've coached youth sports. We were talking about the YMCA. I've loved that experience. And I have never been convicted of felony. So that makes me highly qualified to talk to you about ethics. Okay? So we're okay. What I'd like to do now, I'm going to surprise you during this this conversation. I'm going to splash on the board an image from time to time. You don't know when they're coming. I forgot when they're coming. So I'm just going to hit the button and they're going to pop up. I'm pretty sure there's one coming up next, okay? And I want you to shout out the word good or bad. Are you ready? No, you're not ready for it. Told you I wasn't sure. All right. Back up.
We're all ready.
You know that ethics is about personal choices, right? Okay. Good or bad, right or wrong, ethical or unethical. That's our topic. Good or bad? Good. That's not shouting, and you didn't do it all at once. Come on.
Good.
Thank you. All right.
Bad.
We're good on that. We're all agreeing, right? Okay. They're gonna get harder. I just want to warn you. I hope you guys heard the pop culture. You're getting a lot of that today.
Good. Bad. Bad. Good for the ecosystem.
There you go. That's what I was waiting for. Okay. You found some good in this ferocious man-eating aquatic creature, right? Okay, but you found some good in it. Okay? Actually, if you there's some bad here too, right? Next movie, yeah, the last one. Okay, I told you pop culture is going to rule tonight. Right? So we've got we got some not 100%, but we're feeling good. So let's talk about what happens when you are faced with what we'll just call generally an ethical dilemma. We hear the word ethical or the term ethical dilemma used a lot, I think, but what do we really mean by that, and what do you do when you're confronting one? Well, you have 3 choices, okay? The first thing is you can boldly confront that situation and deal with it. And when I say boldly, I mean you take a stand, right? You say, that's right, or that's wrong, or it's not. And it sounds great when we're sitting here in an abstract kind of conversation to say, I know that's wrong, or I know that's right, it's okay. But there's a reason why the word dilemma follows, because sometimes it's not that clear. But you can confront it. You can ignore it. Ignoring it is a choice as well. It's someone else's problem. I don't need to deal with it. It's not a priority for me, right? You can do that. And in a professional situation, you can say, I got to walk away from this. I've got to go look for another job. And sadly, that is the case in some of these situations. And we'll confront those today. There was one other note I wanted to make before I started. Let me do it now. Usually when I do a presentation, a small group, large group like this, when someone offers me a great piece of input or a great observation, I like to congratulate them by offering them a piece of candy. Unfortunately, you guys already have candy on your desk, so I want you to take a pledge with me here, okay? When I would have awarded you a piece of candy, I will say, okay, take one. And then you take it. Okay, so I want to start. What was your name? Amy, you were the first one to do that. So I'd like to award you with a piece of candy. I want to make it a little more complicated though. You can either go for those, or I did bring my favorites. I have Reese's and I have Kit Kat. Well, don't ask for both. I mean, what do you
Can you give another good answer?
No, that's good. Oh, you'll give me another good answer. All right. So the Reese's are all gone, but I do have more Kit Kats if you prefer them. You don't have Kit Kats.
No.
Excellent. All right, good. All right, let's move along. So what is ethics? Okay, I'm suggesting to you here, I want to be challenged on this now. Ethics involves learning what is right, good, good from evil, proper from improper, and then doing the right thing. Let me ask, are you comfortable with that? Are there other ways you would define ethics? Talk to us.
It's kind of,
Yeah.
everybody has their own thoughts on what each of those things are. So there's
Right.
not really a black and white defined answer.
So the part you're focusing on is the learning piece here. Learning what is good, bad, right, wrong, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, everybody grows up thinking, like when we were hollering about the pictures,
Mhm.
you know, automatically my mind went to bad, whereas Amy was like, well, there's some good in there. So it's kind of like, as you learn growing up, you learn different things that are right and wrong versus maybe somebody else might learn something's right or wrong
Yeah.
and not agree with you.
Good. I love that. Thank you.
And also, like the shark, he's not good or bad, he's just a shark, doing what he does.
It's,
Or
you think you're going to get another piece of candy for the
No.
shark again? Okay. But no, you're right. You're right. And an example of a creature, which is what it is, right? It's a creature doing what it does. There really isn't a right or wrong. We talk about ethics, we're really talking about human behavior. So, good point. Yeah. Yes?
One of the most misused terms is like the Board of Ethics or the Ethics Committee, where they have a purpose and sometimes not a purpose.
Okay. We have I don't know if we want to go into an example yet, but what you're saying, there are sometimes structures around
Board
it.
of Ethics to justify the committee to put others on the defensive.
Interesting. So yeah, you can use a claim of an ethical violation almost as a weapon in some situations, and one could argue that's unethical. What kind of candy would you like? All of it. I can tell. I'm dealing with nonprofit execs. This is really, and the people in nonprofit, I love it. You guys ask for what you need. Okay. One other definition of ethical behavior that I've heard, and see if it resonates with you, is behaving ethically is when you do the right thing when no one's looking. It's another one that just feels right to me. You know, it's like you are behaving ethically when you're under the microscope or the spotlight or not. You just do it because it's right. And you understand. And a lot of times when we talk about ethics, it's a situation where we know when something's right or wrong. We don't need a definition to explain it to us. Okay? So we start with that. It's going to get more complicated. What sort of things can complicate our ethical, our life of being ethical? For example, do we all agree that obeying the law is a good thing? What happens when there's a law that confronts you in a way that you don't agree with it on other grounds?
We just have that.
Yeah.
With-
That
With
moral
the-
issue.
the city
clerk.
Yeah, well, there's a values conflict there, for sure. Okay, and I think you're right. Another example might be you pay taxes, right? That's obeying the law. Do your tax dollars go to things that you might find inappropriate by your values? You know, they're not ethical expenses.
Yeah.
So you're confronting a dilemma there, aren't you? You have to obey the law. You should pay your taxes. You got me told here. I'm not about to suggest nobody, people don't pay their taxes. So there's a conflict there, right? How do you cope with that? Another one, knowing the right course of action, but being tempted to take another direction. And I think we feel that in every day. I don't think you can go through a day where that doesn't happen, right? Making decisions where there's no clear right or wrong. That's an ethical dilemma too. Because if you're behaving ethically, if it's something you're doing when no one is watching, then you're going through this process all the time, trying to figure out what's the right thing to do here. It's not really clear to me what the right thing to do is. But I think there might be a dilemma, right? I'll introduce you to a concept that I learned when I was working at the Catholic Foundation here in Phoenix a while ago. We had an issue having to do with a donor's gift, and it was really complicated. I won't go into the specific issue because it was that complicated. It takes a while. But I spoke with a moral theologian, which was appropriate because of the environment I was in, and I was introduced to a term that has kind of stuck with me. And the term he used was cooperation with evil. It just sounds kind of, I think that should be the title of the movie, but I don't know what it would be about yet. But the idea that because we live in a human state, right, and we all want to do good things, but we have to obey the law, for example. So if taxes are going to something you don't want it to go to, but you have to pay taxes, you are implicitly cooperating with evil, at least in your own life, by your values. And that's the state we live in. So it's a challenge. So think about that. There's a term you might keep, you might not, but it's stuck with me. Now let's talk about nonprofit a little bit. When we're talking about fundraising, if you're doing something that's illegal in a fundraising context, whether it's ethical or not is secondary. Do something illegal in fundraising and it doesn't matter whether you thought it was an ethical conversation. Can we agree with that? Anyone have an example? I'm not sure I have one off the top of my head.
Oh, raffles.
Talk about that.
Well, under Arizona state law, you have to be a nonprofit and recognized as a 501c3 for 5 years before you can have a raffle. And then they're supposed to be registered with the Secretary of State. And a lot of people just ignore the year thing, and they ignore registering it with the Secretary of State. And then when people get the awards, they don't even turn in the accompanying 990s. So all that is just illegal.
That is an awesome example. How much candy would you like, really? What would you like? Good.
I'll just take this one here.
Okay, good. You're on it.
Here.
That's really, really good. Thank you for that. That's a
You're
perfect
welcome.
example. I'll offer you 3 ways of gauging. I saw you trying to reach for the candy there. No.
She's already had
You
2.
agreed to be ethical. Come on. All right, I'm going to give you a 3-step process to go through. The first is the stomach test. What does that mean? You're about to do something, and you feel the butterflies in your stomach. Doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you better check right now if you've got an ethical person. That make sense? You agree with that? Okay. The grandmother test. This is a really good one. Any of you involved in planned giving or estate plan fundraising, do you know what it is? This is a great one in that scenario because the grandmother test would suggest, would you be okay if someone was doing what you're doing to your grandmother? So I say the estate planning example is good. If a planned giving estate planning professional is suggesting to your grandmother that she donate all of her worldly possessions through some trust to the organization, how would you as the grandchild feel with that? And if you were the one doing it, are you okay with that? So test it. If you're doing it to your grandmother, would you be okay with that? That's the grandmother test. The 60-minute test is, ask yourself, how would you feel having to explain what you're doing to Morley Safer on 60 Minutes? And if you don't think you can do that, you probably have an ethical concern. You guys got all serious on me. Yeah, were you afraid about going in front of the camera? All right.
Good.
Yeah, I know.
Good.
It's Mufasa, guys, come on. I don't know if that's Simba or Mufasa. Which one is that? Anyway.
Bad.
Well, she killed a lot of dogs, guys. That's a coat made of dogs, right? Okay. I'm gonna go with bad on that.
Bad.
Who is that?
Oh, is that
Maleficent, right? She's bad, right? Who's that? As.
What?
Anybody see that movie?
Yeah.
Was she bad?
Yeah. Not so bad. It was good.
Okay, this illustration, this Maleficent was pretty bad. This one, not as much. I'm really gonna take you guys to movies. That's it. I mean, it's an older movie. It's been 2 years. Okay. Now, in your organization, we have to ask who's involved in these ethical dilemmas. Who are we worried about being involved in the decision? Who's affected by it, and so on. I've given you a list here. Let's just run through it and see if we can add to it. Well, obviously, you're involved as an individual. Your agency, staff, and leadership. Staff obviously, board leadership. Third one, the board. The whole agency. All of your donors may be impacted. Prospective donors. Who are your other constituents? Perhaps the people you serve, and the greater community. Who else might be? I try to get them all here, but who else might be affected? When you're facing a dilemma, it's got impact. That's the point of this. It's got wide-ranging impact. Family. Can we get
Your own family.
your own family? Yeah. Could be. It could be affecting your family life. Okay.
The people you serve.
Yeah, the constituents, the people you serve, for sure. So let's figure out how do we start to process this? What are the things we should ask ourselves? All right. Well, why is it bothering me? You know, if your stomach's grumbling, or you don't think someone should be doing something to your grandmother, or you don't want to go in front of TV in front of 60 Minutes, why is it bothering you? Ask that question. Who else matters in this situation? And what role do you have? That's a key one. Because you have to figure out, are you someone who can change the course, commit to the course, alert someone else that you're on the wrong course? So what is your role in all this? And what are the specific ethical concerns? You can't just say, well, I feel weird about this. It's I feel like this isn't the right course, or we should at least be asking ourselves that question because fill in the blank, right? What do others think? This doesn't mean, well, let's just find out how everybody's okay with this or not. It's really, is there anyone else feeling the way you do? Have you processed this? Because I give this presentation from time to time, I really think it's kind of a privilege and responsibility. Folks will call me and say, John, I've got a thing that I think might be an ethical dilemma. Can we talk about it? And I've done that too. I've called people up or reached out to them and just said, think through this with me. How do you feel about it? So what do others think is really bringing people to the conversation in a way that you can process it together and see if you really have a concern. And I will tell you, the good news is, a lot of times you really don't. But it's because our moral compass is telling us, let's at least question this before we condemn it. Yes, ma'am?
Won't that be depending upon who you call to ask?
Mhm.
Because, I know if I have a dilemma, there's certain people I call that will agree with my dilemma, and then I know that there's a list of people if I call, they'll disagree with my dilemma. So sometimes you have to be careful to make sure you get an unbiased, the decision of who you call and talk that through with is a person that you're not skewing them, ahead of time is going to skew you one way or the other.
I think you've answered the question right there. I was going to ask you all, how would you respond to that? And would you all agree that don't call someone who you know is going to agree or disagree with you right away?
Right.
Maybe call someone you know is going to be really impartial, maybe distant from this situation.
And call someone that you know is going to be honest. Because, not that they would lie to you, but they might just placate you and not want to upset you in any
There
way.
are people that,
Yeah.
oh yeah, whatever you want,
Yeah.
that's
You need someone
good.
that's not afraid to say,
They're
yes,
so political,
yeah.
they're just,
Yeah.
they're jellyfish, have no spine, can't
Yeah.
stand up.
And there's a
Oh,
certain
shoot.
level of knowledge that they about. So if you call someone who's got no understanding at all about the work that your agency does, they may not be equipped to respond to it. And not a specific example, but what I'm talking about would be, for a while I worked in international philanthropy, and there are different rules in working with agencies that serve overseas. So if I were to contact someone in this room who only dealt with domestic situations, you might not have the capacity or experience to really comment on something that has a very specific aspect to it. So so you want to look for someone who's not going to automatically, oh, I'm your friend, I'm going to tell you the right thing, but I don't really know your situation. You want to get someone who's who, again, and talk to more persons. Anyway, I feel very privileged to get those questions from time to time. And I'll encourage all of you, if you're comfortable, sharing your dilemmas with me. We're going to have some time for case study today, and these are all real situations. And yes, I have changed the names really radically, so you'll have no idea. And I collected a brand new one yesterday, and I don't know if I'm going to be ready to roll out for you today, but it'd be kind of cool, fun if we did. So if you find those, maybe it's something we've already processed, or maybe it's one we just haven't thought about yet. So I am collecting those. This is pretty straightforward. The levels of concern. If something's clearly illegal, bam, that's unethical. And, well, we already talked about it. It's illegal and is that unethical? It doesn't matter. An example, changing the date on a receipt. That's not allowed. We all know that, right? Go like this even if you're not sure. Trust me. It's clearly unethical. Yeah, really. Okay, so volunteer with your organization takes from another place the file of donors and brings it over to your place. It's attractive, right? Tonight, wow, if we had access to all the donors who gave to that organization, that would help us raise money, wouldn't it?
That's just wrong.
That's clearly unethical, exactly. And then what happens when, we talked about this already, when values are in conflict? Honesty and loyalty are in, or honesty and respect, or okay. Let me use the example of, some folks here are involved in grant writing, right? Grant research and writing. Could you comfortably, because you're an honest person, give feedback to a funder that their application process is really awful? It was a bad experience for you, and everyone hates it. All your other fundraisers, you're smiling, I know you're up to it. You know this to be true, right? So you're going through a process and you know it's cumbersome, it's taking more time than it's worth, and they're asking silly questions, and the organization said, or some rep from the organization says, we'd like you to give us your feedback on our process.
I would do it after
After you
they
got-
decided on who got the grant, probably, and be as polite as possible.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, you'd be polite, because that's a
Yeah.
value too. But now you're trying to reconcile your value of honesty and the
I would
value.
it would depend on your relationship with the
Yeah.
funder, but if you have a good relationship and they ask you your honest opinion, right? I would try to be polite, political, but tell them the honest truth, like, you're not in line with what other funders are asking, or, the
Right.
max you give is $2,000 and you have a 100-page application, things like that. I would just be like, you're just not in line with what other funders are doing and using and the questions that they're asking, if you have that relationship. A lot of times when you do apply, they do give you those like online surveys that are anonymous. And I have filled them out before.
And those aren't anonymous.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they claim
They
that.
know
Yeah, some are,
exactly.
yeah,
Oh,
if
yeah.
it's anonymous, then they've taken away the concern that we might have.
Right. But I have answered those too, and, did you find, and they're really generic questions. Do you find the application easy to fill out? Very easy, difficult, you know what I mean? And a lot of times it's for them. They want to improve, and so if nobody ever tells them they want to improve and streamline their systems just as much as all of us do in our own businesses, right? They want to too, and so I filled those out.
You deserve a candy. You really do. Would you like a Kit Kat instead?
No candy for
No
me.
candy? Oh, we have to find a new, what would inspire you?
What would inspire me? Candy usually does,
Candy usually-
but I'm trying to be good, so
No, I
I'll
really
pass
like-
on the candy, but thanks.
I really
Trying
love
to be
the thorough
ethical.
answer. Just being honest with the diet. right?
Yeah.
No, that's a really good thorough answer, but let's not minimize, again, we're in a room here away from the real problem. It's just like interpersonal stuff. If someone says, does this dress make me look fat? I mean, it's that kind of stuff that you don't want to,
You don't want to
wanna-
be honest, but yeah.
What's that?
Said you really want to be honest.
You don't
If it
want to be
does,
honest
make it
because
look bad.
it has the opportunity to offend. And that's the same thing if a funder is asking you about their process, right? So I would suggest you, if you keep these questions handy, they will help you address most ethical dilemmas that you might confront. Have you accurately defined the problem? That's the first thing, guys. If you don't, again, if just the feeling's not going to be enough. Let's really get down to what is it specifically that's problematic. How did this occur? Because chances are, if it's something routine, you wouldn't be even having the dilemma. It's something out of the ordinary. It's something that came along. How did it occur? And what are you intending to accomplish when you make your decision? Who's going to be impacted? Who's going to be injured potentially by your answer or action? And can you discuss the problem or dilemma with the affected parties before you make a decision? That's going to be a big one too. So, you're in that situation, and instead of you in a vacuum trying to decide what your action's going to be, figure out who else is impacted and engage them somehow. That might be a good way to proceed. And are you confident that what you decide today is going to be valid later on? There is a thing called precedent. I know we go, don't you all cringe? Well, we've always done it that way. But the reality is that's sort of a guide to our actions going forward. You have to have behaviors that guide your future. And, what is your experience so you can move forward appropriately. And can you discuss this with your boss, your family, or I used the example earlier, the media. And if you can discuss it and you're comfortable with the situation and the decision, you'll feel more confident. You know you're on the right track now. A lot of times, my experience with these ethical concerns is that there's unrealistic expectations is what's driving the problem. And you're compelled maybe to act a certain way because of the expectations that are placed on you. As fundraisers, I'm guessing that many of you have a responsibility for fundraising within your organization, even if that's not your main job. It's part of it. And so some of what drives us in this profession, in the nonprofit world, is because there are unrealistic expectations that we have and unrealistic expectations that folks have on us.
Bad.
Yeah, you kind of destroyed Tokyo. I'm going to go with that.
Good. Bad, good.
Really? Okay. Anybody not know who this is, first of all? Okay.
Tony Soprano.
Okay, so,
Soprano.
all right.
He
Who
was
said
good
he's
and
bad?
he was good and bad.
Why do you say that?
Because there were some aspects of him that were very good, but some aspects that were bad. His family life, and how he, in some respects, his loyalty to his family, not his family, his family, his mob family.
Lowercase family, right?
Yeah. And he was bad because he did terrible things to people.
Yeah, sure did. Right, but you just, again, we're looking at a person, good, bad, right? Yeah, thank you. That's good.
Good.
Really?
Brat.
Anybody watch the thing? Come on.
She's
She's
a brat.
a brat?
I don't
Did she
remember.
pull the
She's
football
cute.
out from Charlie Brown? Come on, that's
She's
bad.
always being ugly to Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
She's always treating him.
Oh.
That's not HBO, but Netflix. You got Netflix? Okay.
Yeah.
You know who he is. Good or bad?
Oh.
Both? That's funny. You guys really forgive murder easily. I just...
It's hard because that, like, especially with him, his main focus, whether it be right or wrong, is his family. He wants to make sure that his family is taken care of when he dies.
Yeah?
But how he goes about doing that is not a good thing. It's bad.
So would you
But-
say he had some ethical
The
dilemmas?
ends do not justify the means.
Yes.
That gets to the crux of, I think, what you're going at is, as an organization, you're taking care of your own, irregardless of the other things that go on outside. And when you're thinking about that dilemma, taking care of, because you're filling your need with the potential money coming in, but how do you go about doing that? Because you're helping out the people that are in need, but the ethical dilemma
Yeah, I'm a real fan of the show, and a lot of it seems like many of you are. I mean, if you remember what a sympathetic character he was at the beginning, you could kind of feel, and when we went back to the beginning of our talk, we talked about the temptation to do things that might not be right. And what did he do? He actually, with all good intentions, with all, value of family and all of this, and again, it was so well presented, you could relate to him. And then you see what happened, the corruption that occurs over time. So you need a candy. What are you feeling?
I'll take the peanut butter cup.
I'm out of peanut butter cups. I have candy.
I'll
She's
pass.
clutching hers.
I'll pass.
You're okay right now?
Yes.
Okay, good. There was another thought I thought. Someone else had it?
Oh, I was
Yes.
just gonna say, I think and maybe it's an I can thing, I don't know, you said good, bad too, but, for me, I think, it's hard to define a person as good or bad aside from the fundraising part, but I think you can see good and bad in a lot of things, and that's what makes it so difficult. I would use our youth and their parents as an example. Many of them have done bad things, but you cannot judge them as bad because it is situational. And so when I look at fundraising, I can always see when I'm faced with a dilemma, the good and the bad in it. But ultimately, I think about how it affects ICANN as a whole and what the perception that people outside would have on ICANN.
Yeah, you're all, thank you. You're all at the heart of it. You really can't define people as good or bad, but the actions you can. Are they ethical or unethical? And that's that Walter White would be a great example of that. All right, I'm going to just run through because I want to get to the case study. So I want to talk about potential abuses. All right, let's just talk about the first one: misusing donor funds is an abuse, right? And so you're using contributions for a purpose other than those that the donors believe they were going to. Would we agree with that? That's an abuse, all right? So an example, if you get restricted building funds, but you use them to run the organization. You invest funds in an endowment, or excuse me, you take funds from an endowment rather than purchasing equipment, which is what they were intended for. I say here, using restricted funds, let's say restricted funds for a youth program, but you go out and hire a consultant to do some training. That's just misusing the funds. Divulging or absconding with donor prospect information. We used that example earlier. You get a volunteer to take information from one organization. That's privileged information. You can't do that. That's not the right bullet points, I'm sorry about that. Anyway, you know what that refers to, right? Abuse number 3, intruding on private affairs. This is one that's becoming more and more of a concern, okay? How much should you really know about your donors or your prospects? Should we be running credit checks on your prospects? Yeah, it's funny that, a creditor can, but really, should we be doing that? And I don't know if that question is going to have the same answer 20, 30, 50 years from now. But right now, how would we answer it? Probably not. And maybe we could debate that, but that's the kind of stuff we would think about. And then above and beyond basic research. I mean, there are, think about all the things you can learn about people with the technology that we have now. What is it called? My kids call it creeping. Is that? That word tells me there's probably something wrong with it, right? You know what creeping is? You can define that for yourself.
Online stalking.
What's that? Online stalking? Oh, I didn't know it was that bad.
No.
I thought it was just finding out about people on public information.
I guess so.
Yeah. But again, if you're defining it, if you're looking at it as a form of stalking, yeah, I think you probably have some concern about it. But do you do donor research? Right, yes.
I have a quick question about this because we had a development week and it came up ethics. And I'm just curious, so we're a youth program and what is your answer to this? So we don't, intrude and do heavy research on our maybe sponsors or donors, but at the same time, maybe it's an individual, maybe it's a local business, and 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they served an underage person. Or they did something illegal in their personal life, but now they want to donate money to a nonprofit and have maybe their name on our van or, some type of tie to us. So I'm just curious, because we, discuss this a lot, but what's your opinion on that? If we're not, heavily researching, but, are there second chances or is it, I'm not talking like, went to prison,
Let me restate your question, make sure I'm hearing it right, because we have an ethical dilemma that is, right, that's a great example. In fact, if you had told me the whole story, like the specifics, I probably would have translated it.
Oh, yeah, there's no, I mean, this
Yeah,
didn't
and-
happen to us, but it was just something that had come up.
Hypothetically.
Yeah, hypothetically, like, if you found out a donor who's been giving for many years, in the past, 10 years ago, they did something very illegal, or, you know, they served an underage person, when we have CCYSA that's trying to stop the alcohol among youth. So that's what I just wonder, is how nonprofits treat that, if they know, if they research, if, you know, that kind of.
Thank you for asking my opinion. I really appreciate that. If I gave any of you the impression that I was going to signal that something was ethical or unethical in being here, I
Oh.
shouldn't have.
Oh, okay, I thought we were talking
No,
about
no,
examples, sorry.
I'm being a little flippant with you on purpose. What I'm saying is don't expect that I'm going to be able to judge your ethical dilemma. I love the question. The question is spot on. And there are ways to deal with it, which we're going to get to. So
Oh, okay.
I love
Yeah,
it. No,
sorry.
you are right. You have hit the mark on this is a great example of how do you as an agency process a dilemma like that. And my opinion is only worth that much, the same way anyone in this room's opinion is worth that much. But collectively as an agency then, you want to get the opinions of the people who are affected, who matter, who are decision makers, to come to conclusion, consensus together, and do all the things we just talked about. Figure out how it happened. How do we prevent it from happening again? What is it that determines whether we go forward one way or another? So you nailed it. You nailed it. I just don't want you to think I'm going to tell you
Yeah, no.
thumbs up or thumbs down. I won't do that. In fact, if you argue thumbs up, I'll argue thumbs down, and vice versa. Just to do that. Okay. Exploiting relationships would be another abuse, and actually the dilemma that I told you I was presented just yesterday is one of the, it falls in this category, where you are using donors as a means to your own end, and it's tempting. I'll give you an example that's not connected to the one I just got. An organization that works with a local celebrity, let's say Diamondback player, okay? And he offers to sign a baseball for you to give to your significant other because they're a fan. And is that a dilemma? Could it be a dilemma? Could it, now, and when I say offers too, let's change it. Is it okay for you to ask him for that? That's a little different.
No.
It's not okay, right?
So
We're
if
okay?
he gave a signed baseball to his wife, or to
No,
your
no,
wife?
I'm saying you brought him a baseball.
I said my
Would you
husband's a
sign
big
this for
fan.
my?
Okay,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna approach, you're saying you're approaching again to ask for a donation to
Because
this.
presumably he's involved in some way that is going to benefit your organization. Is that, I'm not saying is it right or wrong, I'm asking is it a dilemma?
Yes.
Does it potentially violate this exploitation for personal benefit?
Yes.
Okay, that's potentially. So now you have to
We're getting
process
free
it.
tickets.
Right,
Same
yeah.
thing, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
You get free tickets to the dugout seats,
yeah.
and he gives them to you. It doesn't benefit your organization, but he's a donor to the company, the organization you work for, and you're accepting something personal. Or, you know, if a car dealership, he gives you a free car. I mean,
Wow,
go on and
I
on.
like the people you're working with.
But you know what I mean? Instead of saying, okay, we're donating it to your organization, you take the car for yourself.
The item has value, and
Right.
that value could benefit the organization, and you're benefiting from it. There's a dilemma. Let's just agree there's a
You're profiting
dilemma.
from that
But
relationship.
don't organizations, we have policies about that. So it really should be cut and dry, because there's a policy that says thou shalt not do that. And when you file for your 501c3, which probably most of you didn't have to file for yours, I had to file for ours, there you have to disclose that kind of stuff, and you check off that you're not going to do that kind of stuff. So really, in my mind, there is just no question. It's not an ethical dilemma. It's just wrong because of what you told the public you're going to do.
I
And
think
plus, you have policies and procedures, and if you disobey those, then that's just a no-no.
Well, actually,
But not everybody's
you've just
ethical.
solved the
That's why
dilemma
we're here.
because you have policies and procedures that address it. And that's actually going to be the solution to many of the ethical dilemmas we're going to run into. If there is a policy in place, you honor the policy because you're representing the organization, you agreed to the policy. And see, some organizations would say there's a dollar value limit on what you can accept. The example I used of a baseball, signed baseball may not apply as well, but tickets to an event might be a good example. There's plenty of situations where it's not at all an ethical dilemma to give that to the employees of a nonprofit. Again, depending on how it's gifted, how it's presented, that's actually can be a very good thing. But the policy's guided, and that's the point. Yes, sir?
Along with having policies and procedures, it's having that procedure in place of enforcement of the policies and procedures. Because I'm sure we all drove here today, we didn't drive the speed limit. So, it's part of having rules and having the enforcement rules.
Yeah. How do you enforce the rules as dictated to? But policies and procedures are huge. It will help for some organizations that haven't gotten around to thinking about it. Once they do, they solve a lot of problems. Very good. Negligent security. Let's whiz through this. Openly discussing prospective donors in a rank session. The key here is doing it openly. That's not really very good. Leaving your prospect information or computer files open where someone else could get to them. That's kind of an ethical violation, I would say. Questionable charges or expenses for services. There's a section that we could get into here that talks about commission-based or percentage-based fundraising. And we're a small group, and I want to keep it casual right now, but that is a very important topic. It was a much bigger topic some years ago. What I would suggest to you right now is don't do it, okay? Don't agree to it, and for lots of reasons. But I want to get to the cases, so if you'll bear with me, I would just say there's a strong case for not accepting commission or not engaging in a commission-based fundraising relationship that protects you, protects the organization. And there are alternatives that you could use. I'll let you just quickly read those through. Okay.
Bad.
Good.
We've had this conversation already. Good. I'm glad we didn't have a universal answer. Good.
Bad.
What is that?
You find good in everything. He was good, guys. We only thought he was bad
He
for
was
6
acting
books,
bad
7
as a
movies.
sponsor. What movie is that?
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. There you go. Well, you got it homework. Yeah. Well, okay, so this is really, are you a Cleveland fan or a Miami fan? That'll dictate your answer to this question.
LeBron fan.
Oh, LeBron fan, there you go, so he's good. Okay, so normally I would break into groups, and normally I would have the different groups take on case studies. What I'm going to do today, I actually put in a specific order for this group. I have about almost a dozen, after maybe 10 or 11 ethical dilemmas. And what I thought we could do is I'm going to zip through to one of them and have us do it together. Okay? We may come to quick answers, agreement, and that's fine. Or we may get frustrated with the first one and start throwing things at each other, and that's okay too. Okay? So, what we'll do is we'll just discuss it and come to consider. This is what we would normally do if we were breaking into groups. So, let's go to 7. Take a look. I'll have you. I'll just read it real quick, but you can all see it. So you're the development director of a mid-sized charity. You've been a loyal and dedicated employee for more than 2 years. It happens to be March 14th today. And the CEO gives you a $1,000 check from one of your best donors, asks you to record the check as if it had been received on New Year's Eve the prior year. You explain to the CEO that it would be unethical for you to falsify your philanthropic records. The CEO becomes angry and implies your job could be on the line if you don't comply with his request. Let's make this real simple. What do?
Fire the CEO.
Now, you're an employee.
Find another job.
Another job, because why would you want to work with somebody that's that unethical?
True.
I don't want somebody that's like that to be my boss.
Did I mention all of these are true or are real?
Well,
Yeah, no, I'm just
well,
saying,
I
I want to
work
make sure you
with,
understand,
I
it's all
mean,
real.
I know that something like that happens, but I'm just saying, personally, I would say I don't want to work for somebody with that lack of character.
I don't think I would give up my job necessarily because of someone else's weakness. So I would probably seek legal advice prior to making any move in the company, and then I'm assuming I would make a formal complaint because I wouldn't want, even though I agree, like, that sucks for the company, it sounds like one person is making a poor decision, and if I were to leave and not alert other people in the company to that, the nonprofit ultimately could fall and not serve the people or animals or whatever that it serves, so.
Or the next person might do it and it's just gonna continue.
Yeah,
So
I'd
I
let
like
the
that.
board chair know.
Okay.
yeah. I
So,
think it would
okay,
go
you're all hitting it. You asked me earlier, if I called you up, what would you tell me? Kind of thing, right? If you called me up on this one of my questions kind of ties in what you did. Is there a whistleblower policy in your organization? Yeah?
Yes.
So if there is,
Right.
you've got some protection. If there isn't, and no matter what, guys, you're taking a risk. Unfortunately, with a lot of the ethical dilemmas that we could confront, the end result, sadly, is the person facing the dilemma ends up looking for other work. But they keep their dignity, their self-respect, and their ethical character in place.
Does it become more of a dilemma if it's January 7th?
Why do you ask that
Or
question?
10?
Give me what you're asking. What are you really asking me?
Well, you're saying March, that's a really out there date for me.
Yes.
And I'm an accounting person.
Okay, what does the law say?
The donations are supposed to be December 31st.
What does it say about that? Let me not pick on you here, because I know I'm going to tell you the answer, because I'll give you a situation that happened to me approximately this date. This is one of mine. Okay? Actually, it's a variation on one of mine.
Doesn't it have to be postmarked by a certain date or something?
Isn't the, yeah,
The-
if the
the
envelope
wording-
says the 31st, isn't it different than in your office
The
on the
wording
31st?
of the law is a little more vague.
Of course.
But the point is, okay, there has to be an attempt or a transmission of the gift. In other words, the funds need to be on their way to, is the way I would describe it. And that's not the technicality of the law. But the point I want to make is, if you postmark it by December 31st, it's in the mail, it counts, right?
Yeah,
So you might open it on January 7th, you're okay, right?
yeah.
All right. This happened to me. I had a board member who met with one of the people he was assigned to solicit toward the end of December. When he met with them, that guy gave him a check and said, "This is my contribution for the year." My board member had it sitting in his briefcase and didn't give it to me till March.
In that case.
What was the date of the check?
It was late December.
In that case, why couldn't you, since it was an error, not being unethical on your part, but since it was an error, and say your board member completely forgot it was in there, then was going through his briefcase, found it, was like, oh my gosh. So I don't think that that would be unethical then to date that check then. I mean, that
Well,
thank you or whatever.
The law suggests that when the donor surrendered the funds, or the instrument of the funds, that's when the gift was made. So it's not even an ethical dilemma.
Right.
Really isn't. He gave it to a commissioned representative of the organization who goofed up and
Right.
forgot to turn it in.
Okay.
That's it. So it actually, but look at the process we went through. We thought, wait a minute, is this okay? Can we date this? And he asked those questions. Have the stomach test, have the 60-minute test. I can defend that till the cows come home, because I know my board member had it in his envelope for that long. Yeah. I have no reason to think otherwise, let's put it that way, none at all. Okay. Now, you can complicate an example. I can tell you the reality of that situation was, he opened up and, oh man, I forgot to give this to you. It wasn't my friend gave me this check, and I want to make sure he gets it. No, it was none of that. Now, you could suspect that, I guess.
This happens to almost all nonprofits that are part of the tax credit programs. And,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And the donors gets a hold of the nonprofit in mid-January or something. I forgot to get you the check because there's a deadline of December 31st to get my tax credit. But if I backdate the check, give you the check now. will you give me the receipt for, very few nonprofits are gonna say no to dollars.
And very few, well, frankly, those nonprofits are putting their non-exempt status requests. And I will tell you, and this is because this is a clearly illegal issue, that, and I've had to do this, if you confront a donor to say, I cannot, we don't want to put you in this situation, we cannot put an agency in this situation, I hope you can respect that. And if some other organization is willing to do that, that's sad, or whatever. I mean, you've got to find a way, that's clearly, the risks are too high. Yes, sir.
Back to an enforcement issue of that, because it's trusting in both situations. In the first situation that you said is the person wrote it. In the second situation, I mean, how would you enforce that? Because would you say, as an institution, everything from last year has to be done by a certain date, and that anything, past that date going forward will be?
I've been in organizations that will do that, so I do, particularly the ones that are accepting contributions through the mail. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's something where, in both situations where, one's ethical, one's unethical, but I think that someone who's auditing that, it's either one or the other.
Yeah, you have what the law says, and then you have what's practical and reasonable. If you're getting, you may be getting your mail the middle of January that was actually sent out before the end of the year. You just have to be prudent. You have to be able to defend it. You're going to say, yeah, it was really the real problem are the ones who show up in March. That's the real problem. The ones that show up much later. That's what you really address. The ones who actually tell you up front, can you backdate it for me? Let's do one more if we could. Actually, I've got, let's see if we can do this one real quick. So your faith-based organization works with disadvantaged children. You're contacted by an individual who would like to donate 25,000 shares of tobacco company stock and support your educational programs for 5 years. 4 of your 9 board members adamantly object to this gift on ethical and religious grounds.
I'd say
Sounded a
don't
little
take
bit
it.
like you said take it.
No, don't take it.
Don't take it.
No, it doesn't align with the mission.
It doesn't, if you're a faith-based organization, because my dad was a preacher, and I will
Yeah.
tell you, he would say, and he looked, because I've heard him tell people, you can't do this, because this does not align with what you believe in, therefore you can't take that money. And he himself he turned down money, because it didn't align with his, as a preacher, align with his core beliefs.
Interesting. Okay. Everybody agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we individually are allowed to judge smokers per se.
No,
or
but he
tobacco
wasn't, he
or
just turned down the money.
Yeah, no, but
because
I-
of it was tobacco or alcohol.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because again, we have CCYSA, and so if we're taking stuff from a tobacco company, that could almost be implied like, we don't want our youth to buy cigarettes underage or smoke or drink or do stuff,
But here's something, so isn't there all these we'll just stay with this thing, all these anti-smoking campaigns now where, they're trying to discourage kids from, children from smoking, and, if you're an adult, it's your choice. I mean, you can't tell an adult what to do. So because they're doing all these anti-smoking campaigns, and you guys do anti-smoking campaigns, let's say, right? Well, right, but I mean,
Yeah.
let's just say, for argument's sake, wouldn't that align then with what your mission would be?
And let me point out some nuances to this scenario that might help you a little bit.
Yeah.
Four board
So
members, you have
like.
5.
Well, you've got 4 board members, and that's complicating the conversation, but let me show you what's in here and what's not in here. It's an individual, okay? It's not the tobacco company that's donating the stock. Secondly, if it were the tobacco company donating the stock, if it were, I don't see anything in here where they're asking for publicity or for any kind of implied endorsement or anything of the kind. It could be, but I don't see it in this example, right? What's not stated here is what your organization does with the stock. What's implied, I would say, is what most organizations do. Larger organizations that have their own stock portfolio, it's managed professional. In other words, there's someone else making the decision. And if someone donates cash or stock in another company, what usually happens to that stock in an individual company?
It gets sold
It's
and,
immediately sold. So this gift could have come in, been turned into cash, put into the portfolio, and fund programs for 5 years with no recognition to the tobacco company whatsoever. Does that change your perspective on taking this gift?
No, you're a faith-based organization, and that is different. That changes the conversation from a regular 501c3, like we are. It's
All right, we're gonna have a
different
war here,
versus.
guys. That's it, we're going at it.
It's
No,
different.
I love that you're pushing back on it. I'm just,
It's
this is one of those
different.
where I'm gonna make the case, and I'll tell you why I make the case different. My role model for this one is Mother Teresa. Little known fact, Mother Teresa accepted gifts from known drug dealers. And at some point, she's quoted as saying, there's nothing I can do about where the money came from, there's a lot I can do, where it's going. I'd say that's faith-based. I'm not, and she did not encourage the drug trade in any way. This would be a fascinating conversation. The fact that it's a faith-based organization surprises me a little bit. Change the example to, this is the American Lung Association. And I would argue it doesn't make a difference. And here, you gave us the answer earlier. You gave us the answer earlier, and the answer was, if your organization has policies, gift acceptance policies is what they're called generally, you may actually make that decision before you're ever confronted with this dilemma. Tobacco company or other sin stocks. We won't accept gambling, we won't accept tobacco, we won't accept alcohol stocks. Or you can do what a lot of other organizations do, we say, well, we're not going to turn the money away, but we are immediately going to liquidate the asset.
The way you have it written there, 4 board members say no, 5 said yes. So
Well, okay, so you get to the practical part, but you have a civil war on the board.
between the board.
Yeah, but that debate ends once you have policies and procedures in place. So gift acceptance policies, there's no need to vote. You already voted on what you would do, and you did it before you were confronted. That's the trick, yeah.
what about like, I don't know really enough about it, but now, don't they tax cigarettes and use that for some kind of educational or something?
Yes,
for
yeah,
kids,
in the state
education
does,
or
yeah.
something? So, yeah, it's not, maybe not faith-based, but if you're using that money for good, I mean, yeah.
I know what you're saying, it just doesn't help us with this scenario being the agency trying to determine what to do with the money. That's the trick. Yes, sir.
I think another question is, can you raise that 25,000 from somewhere else? And if you don't raise that 25,000, what's the impact on the people that you're trying to serve?
It's not $25,000, it's 25,000
25,000 shares.
shares, which could
Case of
be
shares.
worth several thousand
Yeah,
dollars.
I would argue that's
But my point
not
is-
part of the issue at all. You could have abundance, you could have scarcity, does it matter if
But my
making
point is that a lot of time with ethical things, it's a degree of what is the worst impact when you're sitting back and weighing it, because I might not like these guys, but I like, look back to Mother Teresa, I like what the money will do. So, I guess my point is, do you not want to see the children educated? And, you know, if they're being educated and good things are happening with it, I think the Mother Teresa.
So, okay, so stick with that for just a moment. If all of what you just said is true, and this was not an individual, but the tobacco company itself making the gift, and if they wanted you to include a sign in front of the building saying, donated by XYZ Tobacco Company, the path you just started walking down would suggest that you're balancing the message about the tobacco company being generous with the work that you're doing with these youth for education programs, yeah. And that would be the kind of question that would probably split your board,
Why?
and it would, but you could solve that dilemma
Back to
by
policy.
putting policies in place before you ever.
Well, on to his point too, you gotta think bigger than that. You might offend other major donors and minor donors in that, to the point where you now just have them in your gift.
And that
Because,
is a public relations question, not an ethical dilemma. But you're right,
but
you're
I
right,
mean,
it's
you
just
gotta.
not an ethical issue.
But you have to think, I mean, you have to think big picture.
So I have a question for you. So say you have an individual that donates to your organization, and say they liquidated their own stock, that they had a tobacco company, but didn't tell you that they liquidated their stock and handed you a check for $25,000, but you have no idea that they just liquidated
Right.
stock.
And you know what, that
So,
goes,
you know,
you would take that because that's their personal private
Yeah,
life,
and they
and we
actually
don't
avoided
get
getting the
into.
tax deduction if they did it that way.
But you know what I'm saying, so like, what if somebody did, they sold stock and they're like, yeah, I made a good profit, I'll donate it to X, Y, Z.
You wouldn't know, and to her point, you
Right.
wouldn't know it. So actually it
that's
leads to
okay
the
to
last one, and
do
I'm
that.
sorry, I'm making up for the 10
I don't
minutes
ask
we took
donors,
getting
hey,
the
where'd
AV
you
going.
get this money?
This is gonna work for us, okay?
So we don't know.
Normally, if we had broken into groups, you'd all have different ones, and you'd have much bigger arguments. This was great, guys. I love the disagreement. Let's get ugly about it. All right, this one is one of my favorites, and we'll do it together. So you're the development director of a major university, and you recently received a 6-figure gift from a longtime donor. The donor is a prominent figure in the community, owns many residential properties, as well as a professional sports franchise. He's routinely honored by other nonprofit groups, including the NAACP, for his community contributions. Today, the local and national media has broken a story that your donor, thanks to an illegal audio recording by his mistress, has revealed himself to be a bigot.
Oh, yeah.
Remember this one? Only a year ago.
Yeah.
I told you they were all real. This one I can go public with because it's so public. I have fun with this because you can have this great conversation about what you would do. This was a real story. The ad that you see here, the clip of this ad, was actually taken out by Donald Sterling himself. It wasn't the university
Oh, no.
celebrating this gift. Makes it even more fun, doesn't
Was
it?
this before or after?
After this.
Oh, it was after, yeah,
Okay.
he was doing image repair.
Okay.
Okay, so the question here, it goes back to you, it's public relations issue. Please distinguish between the public relations dilemma and the ethical dilemma. Because here, I will argue this one, and I'm not giving you guys a chance to rebut it, I'm sorry. But I would argue in this case, UCLA was purely dealing with it on a public relations level and pretending it was an ethical issue. Because the work that could have been done with the money he contributed would have really helped out their program. They have a lot of money, so it's not like they missed the several $100,000. But they were dealing with the public relations dilemma, to your point earlier. So you'll hear the fallacies. It's not unethical if, and you fill in the blank. I'm going to argue against that. We have, I think on our next slide, we're going to have the image I want you to take with you, the poster child for ethical dilemmas.
Go from the rich to give to the poor,
To
right?
do what? Yeah, to get to the poor, right? So you're doing something unethical, but you're doing some good. That's what it's all about. Lots of different sources I'll refer you to if you'd like. I can shoot this out. But, I wish you all the very best in your confronting the ethical dilemmas, and please argue a lot about them. And now you can all have as much candy as you want. Thank you.
Any questions, any further questions?
And I didn't see the thing, my organization actually did want to do the condition days for fundraising, and I'm like, I read that wasn't okay. And you're like, but we don't have any money yet, and we can't put in a salary. What's the other option? That doesn't look that.
I don't know, but if you guys, I would love to address that, but I'm just concerned about time. I'm happy to talk to you offline about it a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.